This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream. On Sundays. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you've had a good week. Hope you have a good week ahead of you. Yesterday was quite a trying time for me. I got knocked down with a migraine halfway through my day, and that pretty much, set up the situation for the whole day. But I'm here now, better, feeling fine, a little sore, a little tired, but que sera, sera. How are all of you doing? Hope you're all doing good. Before I get into the wonderful world of what we're looking at today, who's joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning? Funtime Bats, Eric Peters, Jaeger Pony, Somnamnum Nation, Mike R, JMK, Kiever Dam, Hell Triangle, Bridget, Hi, I'm Steve, Swirl Blue, Mick Zemzem, Resolute Germ. Good morning to you all. And as a note, and thanks to Kiever Dam for doing so, please take a look at the GoFundMes pinned at the top of the chat box for our friends His Kitten, Angry Illinoisian, and Shady Grin. They and their loved ones could use your help if you happen to have a couple of bucks to spare, so please take a look if you would. Also, No Name, good morning. Attila Paxur, good morning. Paxur. Anyway, so I decided, in my infinite decidings of decidings, to take a look at an old friend called Affinity Groups. Affinity groups in schools, because I haven't done anything on those recently, and so I was curious to find out what is the current thinking on affinity groups in schools, or should I say the current justification given for affinity groups in schools. I'll let our speakers describe what those are if you do not know what affinity groups are, and we'll learn as we go. A couple of notes. This is a double feature. I have a video from a public school and a video from a private school to see how both of them approach the subject. The first video comes from the Byers Elementary School, or middle school, one of those two, out of Denver, Colorado. And the second one comes from the Hawkins School, which is a private school in Ohio. Couple of editing notes. So in both videos, at various points, the video cuts away to interviews with children. Children who I assume can be no more than between maybe 9 to 11 years old at most. Now, I haven't watched either of these videos at all, but in the course of preparing them, I did notice that they had these little cutaway one-on-one interviews with these kids. And I found it inappropriate, let's say, because I could only assume that they were cutting away to these kids and talking to them in order to show off the value and or efficacy of their affinity group initiatives. And I just found it a little bit, unseemly to try to use the impressionable children that are probably just repeating back what they've been told as evidence of benefit. And so I have removed those segments from the videos for the sake of this broadcast because I didn't feel comfortable rebroadcasting that. So at various points in both of these presentations, there'll be short, brief moments of black screen that we'll cut to. And that's where one of those little interviews took place. Just for the sake of everyone's edification, if you would like to see the full presentations in their entirety, links are in the description below. Another note, in the first video, it is made up of segments coming from various speakers using various levels of quality equipment to record their sound. Now, I have done my best to try to clean this up and make it palatable, especially the first part. The lady talking in the first part is like talking on a webcam, and her audio is very not good, but it's legible for the most part if you concentrate. That's as well as I can put it. I haven't listened to the whole thing, but that was my impression. So that's all the preamble. So a couple more hellos before I begin. P-Dog Knight, good morning. Art210, good morning. And Mike Savage, Blarg. All right, so this will be a relatively brief broadcast, I think, unless there's a whole lot of pause game going on. The whole thing clocks in at just over 15 minutes, and there is a longer gap of blank screen in between both videos, but you'll know it when you see it, and I'll probably say something as well. So, with all that being said, let's learn about affinity groups in both public and private schools.
Happy Friday, Byers Middle School. It's Miss Price, and I am here to talk to us about our official rollout for affinity groups.
Oh, the official rollout for affinity groups. Yeah, so that's the quality of sound for this first part of this first video. They will cut to various speakers as we go, and the sound quality does improve. This first lady is just talking into a potato microphone.
Right. So we'll talk about why they are here at Byers Middle School, how you can join one, and you'll get a chance to meet our group facilitators.
Now, remember, this first school is a public school. They receive public funding, i.e. federal funding as well. So this is an important factor. It is still an important factor for the private school, but in a different way. But we'll get there as we proceed.
I'm also really excited to hear from some students about their experiences.
Okay, she just kind of skipped over that card. Okay, so for those of you listening at home, she's going over various PowerPoint cards. The first card said, agenda, number 1, why affinity groups? Number 2, how do I become part of one? And 3, meet our group facilitators. All right, so there we go.
So affinity groups are like a designated safe space where everyone in that group shares a particular identity. So this could be identity in terms of race or gender, sexual orientation, language, ability, and religion. Family structure could also be part of our identity.
Yeah, identity. Race as an identity, gender as an identity, sexual orientation as an identity. None of these things are identities. They define nothing about who you are at all. But yeah. And remember, dividing people up on the basis of race. I'm going to focus in on that one in particular. Obviously, right? Again, public schools and divvying up the students on the basis of race as just one example.
And be within an affinity group. So I like to think about it as a club, but instead of like a common hobby, you have common identity markers.
Identity markers. Yes, you don't have common interests. You don't have a common talents. You don't have things that mark your personal interests or merit. No. Just, non-determinative factors that we're going to divvy you up on the basis of. It's a safe space, everyone. You're safe here, being surrounded by people who are exactly like you in one element aesthetically.
And these groups are really important for underrepresented people within a community to come together. Then they feel less isolated and more connected.
Yes, what better way to make people feel less isolated and more connected than to segregate them off into individual groups based on aesthetic qualities? Do you feel less isolated now that you're amongst your own kind, birds of a feather flock together? Yeah, it sounds great. And this is for a place for underrepresented people. What constitutes an underrepresented person? How do you qualify that, I wonder?
It's also a great chance to share your stories and hear stories of others. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Your stories and stories of others. About what? Stories about what? What stories must we all share on the basis of any of those elements, might I ask? And especially in an elementary school where you talk about sexual orientation. What stories do you imagine you're going to have kids share amongst one another in an elementary school in regards to their sexual orientation? What conversations do you plan to encourage amongst your children? And I use your, not specifically, if you know what I mean.
Because participants might share and talk about their experiences or focus on working towards a particular mission or goal.
A particular mission or goal? Like what?
Affinity groups serve different purposes for different groups. And some may be spaces, safe spaces for members of one particular identity. And then others, like other affinity groups, might be open spaces for allies as well.
Oh, spaces for allies. Well, what defines an ally? How does an ally contrast with a member of an affinity group?
And so an ally is typically a member of a dominant group, standing beside members of a group being discriminated against or treated unjustly.
Oh, a member of a dominant group. Or do you mean demographic? Or do you mean affinity group? Okay. Standing beside members of a group being discriminated against or treated unjustly. Oh, discriminated against. Like, I don't know, on the basis of race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, class. It's so good to know that you run an institution that does not in any way, shape, or form diminish people down to their component parts, because that would be discrimination and that would be bad. I'm sure you're a really great ally in that regard.
And so for the most part, affinity groups this year are going to just be within our identity markers, but then certain meetings, we will invite allies to come join us.
Oh, okay. So allies can come in when they're invited to, right? When they're needed. So they are a secondary category of individual from the designated identity marker group. Okay. Yes. We're diminishing isolation in this way, and discrimination, and we're increasing connectedness. Okay.
So for the rest of our morning meeting, we will hear some student experiences, and then you'll meet your facilitators.
Okay, so that was, I believe, a jump over one of the. I didn't put much of a pause there, but I believe that was a jump over one of these student interviews. So now we get on to some more officials from the school.
Welcome to Latinos Club.
Latinos Club. Shouldn't it be Latinx Club? I don't know if you're quite up on the slang these days.
We're your facilitators.
Okay.
And so if you're looking for a place to hang out, come speak Spanish, put some tajin into your life, this is the place for it. You can talk about issues with the community, and maybe just a place to hang out, maybe watch Selena.
This is the place to watch Selena, everybody. Okay. I'm assuming that not just people of Latin descent can join, because that would be, I don't know, half-wise illegal on a federal level, which you're not at all towing the line on, even by introducing these things into your school, but okay.
That'll be this space.
All right, we will meet on Mondays. Our first meeting is October 11th. We'll meet every other Monday at about 4:05 in Mr. Leva's room. Okay, nos vemos.
See ya.
Okay, so there you go. The Latinos affinity group. All right, you can watch Selena and speak Spanish and talk about issues in the community. And by this method, we are decreasing discrimination and increasing connectiveness.
Hey y'all, this is Miss Henry here to introduce Feminist Forum.
In elementary school? Really? Okay, what does the elementary school Feminist Forum do?
Feminist Forum was formerly known as Women's Forum, but we wanted to change the name to be more inclusive of those who are non-binary.
Oh, okay. So simply being a woman and then being a feminist are the same thing. So a fact of biology is equitable to a gender-based ideology. That was an easy switch for you to be more inclusive. Okay, elementary school, huh? All right.
Is a group to talk about issues of gender equality.
Gender equality. When the first version of this was a women's group. Okay. And also, if it's gender equality, why be feminist? Why not be like the Egalitarians Club? I know it's a stupid question, but I ask it all the same.
We talk about a lot of current events and do
Uh-huh.
a lot of community building and just being a part of a space where we can talk about issues and work to solve them.
Oh, I don't suppose you're going to tell us what issues you work to solve or what success stories you have behind your group so far?
Especially in our community.
Uh-huh.
It will be taking place on Thursdays from 4:10 to 4:40, and I hope to see you there. Bye.
Elementary School Feminist Forum. Okay, next.
Hello, Bars Middle School.
Hello! I'm Hyacinth Bouquet.
For like the 15th time in this video.
What?
It's Miss Price.
Oh, you're the lady from the first part. Why didn't you record your dialogue with this camera? Because the first one was terrible. Okay, so what affinity group do you lead?
And I just want to let you know that I'm also supporting and organizing Asian Pacific Islander Student Association.
Oh, aren't you the last person who should be doing that? Don't you think it's a bit arrogant of you to be assuming to know how to organize an affinity group that you at least observably do not belong to? Do you think that? I don't know. Is that appropriate, everyone? Is that, or is she culturally appropriating? I don't know.
So we will meet on Tuesdays at about 4:05, right after school.
Right after school. Okay, so using school facilities, right, and school faculty, right, okay, and you are a public school, all right.
Until 4:35, and we'll meet in room 116. So if you're interested, please fill out our interest form. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, Falcons. This is Miss Thorsland.
And you're using Potato Camera 2, okay? For those of you that are listening at home, the card on the screen says Association of Students with Disabilities Affinity Group. What is it? A space for those that identify. A space for those that identify as having a disability to connect with each other and our community. Identify as having a... Okay.
I'm going to be one of the facilitators for our Association of Students with Disabilities Affinity Group, and I just wanted to give y'all a quick review.
Okay.
So what is it? It is a space for those that identify as having a disability to connect with each other and our community. When is it? The first and third Mondays from 4:15 to 4:45. Where? Mr. D's room 119. Here's our emails at the bottom.
Okay, so again, making use of school facilities and resources and personnel for affinity groups. I just want to keep underlining that because it is important.
And if you are interested, please fill out our interest Google form that is coming your way shortly. Thank you.
Okay, so that little break there, that's where they cut to interviewing with a couple of kids. It was interviewing a couple of kids about the Muslim group. No, I'm not kidding. The Muslim group on campus. Now, I'm assuming that there is also a Christian group or a group for Jewish kids or something else. I mean, I wouldn't think that a public school would be promoting a particular religion, save for the fact that they have a specific religious group at the school. But yeah, so I cut out that little part of it because like I say, wasn't comfortable with that, interviewing kids in that way or rebroadcasting it. So that's what that little jump was. So that yes, the public school also has a religious oriented group using school facilities. Now, I am not a civil rights lawyer. I'm not an expert. But one thing I do know is that in the education amendments of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and several other places, those institutions that receive federal funding would be breaking the law by establishing activities or resources, etc., that are restricted on the basis of race, gender, religion, and so on. Now, the only loophole that I am seeing here, and it may be a completely saving grace loophole, is that, well, it's called the Latinos group, or it's called the LGBT group, or whatever, but anybody can join. That in my mind, as just a layperson, must be the only loophole that prevents them from having a massive lawsuit drop on their heads. But all the same, merely the implication that you're going to be dividing students up on the basis of these things, or encouraging them to divide themselves up, makes me a little uncomfortable. I don't know about you.
Hey, Byers Middle School. I'm really excited to talk about the Jewish Cultural Club.
Okay. So again, the bit I cut out was a couple of kids talking about the Muslim club, and this is the Jewish club. Okay.
The Affinity group.
Uh-huh.
Miss Jessica Curry, our school social worker, and myself are both Jewish, and we're excited to share in Jewish culture with students who have the same identity.
With students who have the same identity. Okay, well, so unless he says something else, then what I just said a minute ago just got thrown out the window. So this is a school club explicitly for Jewish students. Okay?
We're going to make this club time what you want it to be. So please join if you're interested and you share our cultural identity.
If you share our cultural identity. Okay. Again, and I'm going to reiterate this several times over the course of this, I am not a civil rights lawyer. I do not have an expertise in the law or anything else. But these affinity groups in schools, to me at least, at the very least, tread the line of the principles behind Brown v. Board of Education and the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the education amendments thereafter. That's where I'm coming from for everybody's reference.
We're going to meet every other Thursday afternoon after school. We'll get you those dates as soon as we have them. Hope to see you there.
Good afternoon, Byers Falcons. My name is Miss Balakir, and I will be facilitating the middle school BSA. BSA stands for Black Student Alliance.
Is there a comparable white student alliance? How would that sound coming off of a school flyer, you think?
And our goal is to provide Black students a community, a brave space, and an opportunity to create change.
Oh, okay. Black students specifically. All right. So you have a school-backed and organized event or group explicitly for a particular racial demographic. Okay.
Together, we will celebrate and learn about our history and culture. We will create community together through...
Yes, because everyone who is Black has the same culture. Just so you know, everyone, if you have a dark skin tone on this planet, you are all part of the same culture. Our culture. Okay. And we're not monolithing anybody here. No.
Through getting to know each other and other activities. And finally, we'll seek ways to promote equity and inclusion.
Yes, we're going to promote equity and inclusion by segregating the Black kids away from the other kids. Are you kidding me, lady? Thank you, P-Dog Knight. Do they not have a lunchroom at this school? You want connection? You want interaction? You want to have equity and inclusion? Yeah. Recess, lunchtime, and classrooms made up of kids from all over the place. What is... Okay. What is an elementary school in modern America, for the most part, if not a melting pot? Right? Because when I went to elementary school, I went to school with a whole bunch of kids from a particular area, in my district or whatever, right? Okay. And I got to know those kids pretty well, more or less, over, 6 years or whatever. And then I went off to junior high, and junior high brought in kids from various elementary schools. And so there was a whole new melting pot and mixture of kids from all over the place that I'd never met before. And then what happened when I went to high school? High school brought together kids from different junior highs. And all of a sudden, it kind of does it on its own, doesn't it? Oh, but that's not good enough. That's not good enough. No, we need to then diminish all the kids down to race and gender and orientation. I mean, you guys listed orientation. I cringe at the notion of what an elementary school sexually orientation-based group would be doing, or who would be leading that group and what they would be talking about. But yes, yeah, they have no lunchrooms. They don't have recess. They don't have any kind of, team sports. They don't have anything that is just a natural outgrowth of school that could bring kids together and include, etc. No. So, P-Dog, I guess the answer is no. They don't. They don't. It just doesn't. Okay, well, tell me more about the race group.
If this sounds like something that would be interesting to you, we will meet the second and fourth Tuesday of each month, starting on October 12th. We will meet from 4:05 to 4:35 in room 124. I hope you sign up, and I look forward to working with you all.
Happy Friday, Falcons.
Okay, so again, not being a lawyer, the only outs I see for this not violating federal law is that they are voluntary and they are seemingly all occurring after regular school hours, yet they are still making use of school facilities, resources, faculty, and they're being promoted by the school as a beneficial component of the educational process. I mean, this stuff must be riding right on the razor-thin line. If not, I don't know. It's still...
In addition to all the affinity groups you just heard about, we also have a gender and sexuality alliance.
Oh, well, my curiosity is about to be answered in part. Okay, tell me about what the elementary school gender and sexuality affinity group does.
In addition to all the affinity groups you just heard about, we also have a gender and sexuality alliance, which meets on Fridays from 4:10 to 4:40 in room 33. And all the information you just learned about is in your inbox right now in an email from Miss Chelsea Price.
Okay, first off, that little jump cut that happened there, that was not me. I'm really curious to know what was cut out there. Because of all the ones mentioned so far as cringe-worthy as they are, this is the one in particular I'm most morbidly curious about.
Titled Affinity Group Information.
Yeah.
Have an awesome Friday and have a fan-falcon-tastic weekend.
Okay, so nothing. Okay, at least the other ones, the other group leaders or guides or whatever, they mentioned at least some details, abstract or otherwise, of what takes place in their groups. Mysteriously enough, nothing is mentioned here about the Gender and Sexuality Alliance in an elementary school. The absence speaks a lot more loudly than perhaps anything you could have said.
Peace.
Okay, and that was the end of the first video. So that was all affinity group initiatives from a public school. That is the Byers Elementary School or Byers Middle School in Denver, Colorado. Again, so as I intimated quite strongly before, if you do not know, or if you're joining late, Federal law requires that any educational institution, or really any institution whatsoever, that is receiving federal funding in some way, shape, or form, are disallowed from creating programs or opportunities or activities, etc., that are divided on the basis of race, gender, religion, ethnicity, orientation, and so on. The Byers School is a recipient of federal funding. The school, the teachers, in some way, percentage-wise or otherwise, receive money from the state, from the government, the federal government. And consequently, they should be disallowed from creating activities, groups, and so on, even in after-school hours, that discriminate on the basis of those factors. And yet, here we go. All right. So, the next video comes from a private school. This is the Hawkins School in Ohio. Now, as a private school, and granted that they do not receive any public funding whatsoever, and I haven't examined their tax sheet to know for sure, but I am assuming that the entirety of their funding comes from donations and grants and so on. On that basis, technically, they are not disallowed from having discriminatory practices in their school. However, the principles under which we all operate as Americans, even if you're not required to do them by law, especially in this case, I think are still important and still say something about an institution and the people, the adults running an institution, when they do things that seemingly defy those principles that we're all purportedly meant to be striving for in this country. Thank you again, P-Dog. All these groups meet for 30 minutes twice a week. What exactly are they accomplishing in this short time? Here's your peers. Anyone have a complaint? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the problem is the only people who could tell me about what happens in these things that I would either be comfortable with hearing from or believe in some way, or would be tend to believe, would be the adults. Because the kids, you have impression. I mean, elementary school kids. Okay, we're talking like what, 6 to 12, somewhere within that range. Minors, underage minors, who spend most of their weekdays under the tutelage of these same adults. I wouldn't believe anything that they said, not because I think that they're lying, but because they don't know any different, and they're being told things that are good from the people that are effectively in charge of them. Unfortunately, as schools become more and more the parents in their own minds, if not in reality. Anyway, thank you, P-Dog. What are they accomplishing? I don't know. Here's the people that look like you. Don't you feel good being around people that look like you? All right, so all that as an aside. Now we're moving on to the video from the Hawkins School. I believe there's only one speaker, and I think there was only 1 or 2 instances I had to cut out. No, I take it back. This second video is where they cut to like 4 or 5 instances of putting a kid against a wall and filming them and asking them questions, which was really creepy to me. You'll see various cuts as we go.
Hello, POCC. My name is Michelle Mullins-Means.
POCC, as much as I understand that means People of Color Council or Community or something. There is this organization that exists above several independent schools. The National Association for Independent Schools has promoted the POCC in the past as well. So it's the People of Color. It's honestly escaped my mind. It's either convention or council or community or something. But so she's addressing the larger organization to which I assume the Hawkins School has some connection. So let me back up a little bit just for edification's sake.
POCC. My name is Michelle Mullins-Means. I am so honored to be a part of this presentation, and I'm eager to talk to you about why affinity groups, starting on the elementary level, are so important.
Okay. Affinity groups on the elementary level. Remember, it's ranging from 6 years old to 12, within that range.
I want to start off by saying when I look at the kids that are in my affinity group, I teach 4th and 5th graders. I see myself.
You see yourself. Right. You see yourself. It's important that you see yourself.
I was one of those kids that was placed in a predominantly white space, and as a result, lowered my confidence.
Okay, that weird fade cut, that was part of the original. That wasn't me. Okay, so you were placed in a predominantly white space, and so you feel far more comfortable around people who look like you. Because people who don't look like you make you feel uncomfortable. All right.
There's something about being around people that look like you, having your culture seen and celebrated, that builds self-esteem, builds a sense of importance.
Builds a sense of separation, builds a sense of alienation, or even builds a sense of superiority over people who don't look like you. Maybe.
And who you are as a person. And
No. Stop. What you look like says nothing about who you are as a person. What culture you come from says nothing about who you are as a person. There have been Catholic saints and sinners. There have been serial killers who pray every night before bed. Give me a break.
Validating who your people are.
Your people. Your people. Okay. All right. Well, who are your people? And if any of your students happen to not look like you, do you treat them differently? Do you think of them differently? Do you feel less connected to them simply on the basis of aesthetics? I don't want to have to ask these questions, but you're causing me to have to, as you are in charge in some way, shape, or form over children.
So when I got the opportunity to be a part of the affinity group at Hawken Lower School, I jumped on it. Not because I had the time.
Well, I'm sure it's such a burden for you. I'm sure. Gosh, you are. You want the self-sacrifice. I
am a mother of 2 young sons.
Okay.
I have a packed art education schedule.
But it was really important for you to support racial divisions in your school.
But because of the importance
to
our students of color. To be seen.
Seen as long as they are at some time during the course of the school week ushered away from everyone else.
And to let them know that they matter.
Yes, they matter because of what? What are you valuing in this construction? What are they being taught to value as connection between one and another? Think on that for a second, would you?
So, I had never done this before. Like many of you, I'm sure, are wondering, well, how do I even get started? And that was my first question when I was organizing last. I thought about
how do you get started? Well, I mean, I don't know. Let's see. What are the conditions under which that someone can be a part of this group? Well, they have to look a certain way. It really is complicated, isn't it? It is so complicated when you diminish people down to a single common denominator and say, you belong and you don't. I'm sure it was very, very difficult for you to figure out how to arrange this.
About those feelings from long ago, over 30 years ago.
So you've been holding a grudge for over 30 years. You decide to carry over your bitterness over into children today. Okay. Yeah, sounds like a smart thing to do.
Long ago, over 30 years ago. And I started preparing myself for teaching Affinity Group last year. It was my first year.
Yeah. Oh, how did you prepare yourself? What special training was required?
I wanted to put myself back in that same place of being a young child.
30 years ago. You want to put yourself in that same place 30 years ago. Okay, so again, you are reliving and projecting your childhood perspectives and experiences as the basis for which to teach children today. Okay?
Surrounded by people that don't look like me, that don't share some of the same beliefs and cultures.
Yeah, well, gosh, I mean, who wants to mix with different people? I mean, only like should spend time with like. I can only feel comfortable around people who look like and think exactly like I do. That's the only way to live. I need to create this bubble, this nice, racially oriented bubble for myself.
And what would I need to feel comfortable enough?
I don't know.
Where I could share some of my stories.
You tell me.
So I designed my first project to be a painting called You Matter.
You Matter. On the basis of what?
The photo you're seeing is the very first day of Affinity Group.
Okay, the photo I am seeing. Let me back up here. All right. Well, on the basis of what you were saying, why is that kid there? Now, I take absolutely no humor or pleasure in having to ask that question, but unfortunately, our speaker here has set the standard. She has done this. This is her project. This is her passion. She's taking time out of her busy, busy day to portion off children in a school on the basis of their skin color. So, at least visibly speaking, I have to ask, what's this kid doing here?
The very first day of Affinity Group.
We're in the height of the pandemic.
Again, okay, well, I don't know. Have you failed at Affinity Group here?
I was on a cart, so I didn't have a permanent meeting space, but we still made it work.
Okay.
By the end of our first session, I could tell that the kids were starting to understand that our experiences were common and that they were seen.
Common, what experiences? What feeling out of place? Feeling lonely, like you don't belong? You think those experiences are reserved for people with a particular melanin count?
I told them to save their You Matter posters and put it somewhere in either their room or their house where they could keep referring and looking to it and remembering that even though the dominant culture doesn't represent them all of the time, their culture still matters.
The dominant culture? Well, that was not the focus of your initial statement here. Dominant culture? Okay, well, what's the dominant culture? What do you mean? I really hope you tell us, because you've shifted quite quickly from something that is, very objective, skin color, to something that is a little bit more subjective. But then I don't know what you mean. Dominant culture. Because when I think of culture, the dominant culture, I think of American culture. I think of the Constitution and the principles and the values that it espouses, that we're all sort of collectively working to abide by and work towards. That's what I think of a dominant culture in America. So I don't know what you mean. That's what I think. What do you think?
So after our first session, the kids really enjoyed it. They could see that there were other students of color that they might not normally see throughout the school day.
Because that's important.
And it was time to start digging a little deeper.
Oh, okay. What is digging a little deeper little deeper than skin deep.
So by the time we were able to meet again, we were quarantined again.
Uh-huh.
So instead of being able to meet in person, we had to meet through Zoom. I found this series of books online that teaches you how to talk to children about heavy topics.
Okay, for those of you at home, we have a kid's book about belonging. I'm going to jump back a little bit because there's a couple other book covers here. A kid's book about depression. What? Okay. It's a book series, I'm guessing from the... No, it's not from the same author, but it's the same series. A kid's book about depression, a kid's book about belonging, a kid's book about something that starts with R. Is it rage? That'd be something. Okay. So where were we? Sorry.
After I shared the book, we opened up for discussion, and some of the stories that I heard from elementary students about their experiences in white spaces.
Their experiences in white spaces. Oh, okay. And what does this page of this book say that you're showing us right now? Belonging is when you are a part of something, when you feel included. Oh, tell us about the dangers and the toxicity of quote-unquote white spaces.
Were incredible. This book allowed them to break down what the feeling of belonging is versus being excluded.
Oh, being excluded, like implying that white spaces are something to be avoided or white spaces are somehow detrimental. Okay, and again, as we cut to black here for a second, this is where a one-on-one student camera interview was taking place.
I've always believed that using current events is a powerful way to make things relevant to our students.
Please do not bring up George Floyd.
And it just so happened that during this time, the riots on the Capitol were happening.
Okay, January 6th. Okay, tell us how the January 6th riots affected your affinity group spaces.
There was a lot of confusion on the part of my affinity group students.
Oh, your affinity group students. They were special in that? No one else was curious or confused about what was going on? Okay.
I didn't have all the answers for them.
Oh, a cherry-picked image of a guy carrying a Confederate flag, because that was the norm that day, you know.
I also thought about how scary this must have been for them, because I was scared myself as an adult. It also had to seem confusing to children seeing adults act in such a violent and discriminatory way.
Discriminatory? Oh boy, yeah, no, violent discrimination we can't stand, but gentle, friendly, smiling discrimination in an elementary school, that's perfectly acceptable.
So I asked them to think about if they were in a conversation with some of the folks that they had seen in the riots.
Okay, I don't know about you, but in elementary school, my sense of politics and the larger world of current events and everything really didn't matter, right? I mean, it just didn't invade my space. I was more concerned with, like, you know, my schoolwork and getting home in time to watch cartoons or something. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. So having a elementary school teacher of their own volition, right? I mean, nothing said she had to bring this up in her class. She was not required to talk about this or give an opinion or make a deal out of it in class. She chose to do this, and she chose to give her interpretation of events over to her kids.
How that conversation could be turned into a positive, productive way to solve problems, to come up with vocabulary that would make the situation positive and productive.
Okay, this is a school in Ohio. January 6th was in Washington, D.C. This wasn't anywhere near these kids. This was not part of their world at all, short of their parents really being nuts about it at home or something. Why? Why make this a deal? Are you going to tell us? So come up with words that defy all the hatred and everything that were taking place. Okay. Okay. And then again, another blank space where we cut to a child interview.
So finally, we got some new leadership, and there was a positive light coming to the United States.
Yes, the new leadership has been such a positive light. Boy, oh boy. I know this was recorded a few months ago, but yeah, positive light. Have you paid attention to the news lately? Admittedly, again, this is recorded before the invasion of Ukraine, but not before we'd seen the downturn in the economy and everything else over the last year.
I discovered that the talented Amanda Gordon also has an equally talented twin sister named Gabrielle.
Amanda, is this the girl that read the poem at the inauguration? Is that the same girl whose staff and or herself denied anyone who was not black from translating her poetry into other languages because it wasn't appropriate? Am I completely off base in remembering that was the case? That there were several individuals who were employed to translate her poetry into several different languages, but were then fired or encouraged to resign because they didn't fit the aesthetic that her and her team required to even translate her poetry?
Gabrielle Gorman created a powerful short film talking about the experiences of being a person of color in America.
Her experiences. Okay. So this is very important to you. This particular skin color is very important to you.
In the film, she talks about being uncomfortable in her own skin and stereotypes that are often put upon us as people of color.
Okay. Well, so the remedy for this, of course, is to portion away everyone else on the basis of their skin color and somehow make alien or unwanted, quote unquote, white spaces and instill that notion into your kids. Okay.
Afterward, 4th and 5th graders had an open discussion about how important self-love is.
Okay, so again, you are bringing this stuff into the classroom. You are putting your personal perspective and philosophy on this material, and then you're asking the kids to respond to what you have put upon them. Right? In any other circumstance, they probably wouldn't give a rip, but you made it the issue. And what? Are you taking validation from the fact that the kids are responding to what they're being assigned in school to do, as though that somehow justifies A, you doing it, and B, your perspective is being correct? Because that's what it feels like. That's a sensation I'm getting from this. And it's also the sensation I got just seeing that you included interviews with children in the course of your presentation.
And how important it is to love yourself so that you can open that love to others.
Oh, well, can I love myself if I'm not a person of color? Should anyone love me if I'm not a person of color? Should anyone feel comfortable around me if they are a person of color because I don't look like them? What kind of love are you promoting here?
As a result of our...
Look at this picture. Look at this. If this does not exemplify what I have to assume is happening both psychologically and socially right now in this school, in this classroom, you've got all these kids up front, and you got this one kid in the back behind the table, not holding anything up and just kind of standing there. And here's our teacher, peace sign up. If you needed a more exemplative portrait of what is being encouraged when you start divvying kids up on the basis of race and instilling them with the idea that there is a value to be had in skin color, positive or negative, I don't know if I could come up with a more appropriate portrait.
Conversation, we wrote love letters to ourselves and stitched a special envelope to keep them in.
Okay, well, that's lovely. That's really that offsets everything. It really does. Boy, oh boy. Let's see. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. As you said before about self, I mean, come on. Yes, the underlined word there is self. Is about you. It's your responsibility, right? Self-esteem and so on.
So you'll notice throughout my presentation that there is a common thread of creativity while bringing my affinity group kids in and strengthening our bond and becoming comfortable within the environment of our school and in the environment of our affinity space.
Yeah, it's almost like, it's almost like you're using arts and crafts as a kind of Trojan horse to instill in children a particular sociological ideology that you are a big fan of. You're right. It does seem like you are using innocent school activities as a delivery mechanism. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I don't know if I could have come up with that as cleanly as you did.
That there is a common thread of creativity while bringing my affinity group kids in and strengthening our bond and becoming comfortable within the environment of our school and in the environment of our affinity space.
Unless, of course, it's a white space in the school. In that case, it has to be avoided, and it has to be vilified simply on the basis of the skin color of the people surrounding them. Because, your space is a safer space than any space outside of your space, so long as everybody looks the same. All right.
My kids really enjoy art, and I feel like it is a universal way to get them excited to come.
Yes, it is almost like bait, isn't it? It's almost like a little piece of cheese right there on the trap. The trap being an ideological indoctrination. You're right. It is. It is. Kids are curious like that. They're creative like that. They want to have fun like that. You know.
And maybe even without them realizing it, dig deeper into some of these social issues.
Yeah, but without even realizing it, I'm instilling in them a perspective of racial exclusion, guys. Isn't that great? Through arts and crafts. They don't even know it. I'm stealthy. I'm just sneaking it in there. I mean, I guess in one way, shape, or form, credit where credit is due for having some self-awareness of what she is doing. Right? She's not ignorant of the fact of what mechanism she's taking advantage of to bring small children onto her side of the ideological perspective. She knows what she's doing. But it's virtuous. It's a virtuous subliminal messaging. Because the skin colors are correct for her.
So unfortunately, I don't have any student examples left from this particular part of our affinity group.
Yeah, because she had 3 or 4 different cuts in here. I think there's another one. There's at least one or two more, I remember.
But I do have my teacher example here.
Oh.
So the significance behind creating a stitched envelope is because I wanted it to feel like it was something important, something handmade that they can go back and refer to. So they created these out of felt, and then their little letter would go inside, and I had them to list 10 things that they love about being them.
Please tell me, please, for the sake of my own sanity, please tell me that none of them wrote down their skin color. please tell me that you didn't encourage them to do the same. And here's another cut for a student interview.
So I wrapped up the first year of my affinity group with a little party. I have a game called Art Bingo.
Bingo! I love bingo! Don't you guys love bingo?
Bingo. What? Of course!
I love bingo. Tell me about your bingo.
We brought snacks.
Uh-huh.
I got prizes.
Yeah.
And it was just a really nice way to wrap up the accomplishments, the rich conversations that we had.
Okay, was this a party just for kids based on their skin color? Did you have this little event, this little party, this little celebration, and exclude any kid who didn't belong to your affinity group? Wow, that sounds great. What a way to build belonging and inclusion and interconnectivity, and giving kids special treatment on the basis of their skin color.
Rich conversations that we had that year.
So if you were to ask my affinity group students,
if I were to ask your affinity group students anything, I would dismiss it because it is not an objective perspective. It is something being instilled in them in the crucible that you have created around race and racial identity. And the fact that you would cite your students' perspectives, I know we haven't heard it yet, but you all bring up as though that somehow justifies any of this. It says a lot more about you than it says anything about your students.
So if you were to ask my affinity group students what was the best part of the year, that day would probably be it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, the special treatment for nothing else than your skin color. What an achievement.
So now I'm into year 2. We're in 2021. We are in year 2 of the pandemic. And a lot of the affinity group kids that I had from last year are now middle schoolers. So I felt like I had to establish again that sense of community and comfort.
And how did you do that?
Before we dug into the deeper issues.
Yes. Well, again, it is a staged process. You first have to hand somebody the free dose of the drug to get them, acclimated to it. And then you start talking about price after they come back for more. Or in this case, have no choice but to come back because they're kids and you're responsible for them for some reason.
So knowing how much our young ones love technology, I found this cell phone worksheet off of Teachers Pay Teachers. I will put the handle below.
Okay.
I also wanted to take it up a notch by introducing them to an artist that I found on Instagram.
Artist FDZ Graffiti showed my affinity group how to upscale discarded paint cans.
And she wears her Cash App address on her shirt. Hey, I got to admire the hustle.
Students learn the difference between vandalism and what is graffiti art.
The difference between vandalism and graffiti art. Well, I think the difference is permission, more or less. I think that really is the dividing line between vandalism and graffiti art. It's permission to do so.
My affinity students immediately fell in love with Felicia and her work, her creative clothing, and she had such a great rapport with the students.
Great. Could she have, I don't know, been brought in front of all the students? Do you think kids who aren't kids of color might have enjoyed that same thing because art is a universal connection, as you mentioned? Were any other kids given the opportunity, even if they didn't look the way you wanted them to?
We're hoping to have her back in the spring.
And that's it. That's the end of the video. And that brings a conclusion to this double feature. If you had not noticed, and I don't think it was too difficult, there was a heavy dose of disgust in my voice and disappointment, I suppose, and, edging on anger in places. Because this is the problem, isn't it? And she underlined it very clearly and actually very effectively. Teachers who feel that they are empowered to bring their personal ideological agenda into schools. Public schools are a big legal problem, but on a fundamental principle problem, you're using kids, using children. You're wrapping up your worldview, which is, worldviews vary one to the other, but a racial identitarianism worldview in innocent activities for children. Just think about that for a second. Think about how insidious that is. Think if our speaker in the second video were white, right? And saying the exact same things, putting out the exact same sentiments. If our speaker, or let's just take her entire script, right, and replace children of color with white children, or white spaces with colored spaces. Just flip those scripts and then put that exact same presentation in front of our speaker. What do you think she would say about that person? What do you think she would say about that initiative? I have a feeling she would not be the biggest fan. And you know what? She'd be correct. She would be correct. Because racial identitarianism is poison. Doesn't matter what race we're talking about. You want to segregate kids on the basis of race in a school. Just symbolically speaking, I can't think of a more destructive refutation of the principles under which we've supposed to have been operating in this country at least since 1964. At least legally speaking. It sickens me. It sickens me that a grown adult thinks this is a good thing, that a grown adult is being allowed to promote this as a good thing. Doesn't matter if we're talking about our first speaker or the collective of our other speakers. And just, again, the notion that there is a gender and sexuality group in an elementary school that was very suspiciously edited in its presentation, I might add. Wonder why that is. Can't imagine. Anyway, I will cease my tirade for a few minutes here and give the floor to you all. If you have anything you'd like to add, please put it in the chat now. I'll scroll up a bit and see if there's anything I've missed. P-Dog Knight, a.k.a. Indoctrination. Yep. Here. Again, she's completely aware of what she's doing. She's not our second video speaker. She knows what she's doing. She told us. So she can't claim some kind of blissful ignorance over it, which makes it even more outrageous. I don't know. My vocabulary fails me right now. Ryan R. People pay something like $20,000 a year to send their kids to this school, although something tells me there is a sliding scale to increase diversity. Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is that the amount I forget. I looked up the tuition to the Hawkins School at some point. It's something like $21,000 on average or something per year, and this is the quality of education they're getting. But here's the thing: you don't have to pay $20,000 a year to get this kind of quality education instilled in your child. Hey, go to the Byers Middle School in Denver, Colorado. It's a public school. They'll do the same thing for a heck of a lot less. Let's see. Attila Paxur. Cult on an interstate and national level. Yeah. And again, you would think this is a fringe thing. You would hope this is a fringe thing. But what I wanted to at least underline here is that this is occurring in both public and private schools. A lot of the videos I've done on affinity groups have, for the most part, focused on private schools, which, again, legally speaking, I guess they can dodge the consequences of promoting racial segregation in a school for children. But then you get to the public schools, and that's where I'm just, how? Why? Let's see. Who else is on here? Somnambual Nation, not just a grown adult, but an entire system that supports this. Yeah, and that's the other thing to remember. Just for the sake of, focus, our secondary speaker here in the second video, she's not existing and operating in a vacuum. Right? She is being employed. She's being paid. She's being enabled by the administration and the people paying her salary, everything. So for every single teacher we saw in the course of these videos, they are actually representative of a much larger issue that is supporting and allowing and pushing this forward. And they're people who are in charge of things. It's not a small issue. Eric Peters, how the hell do these people have jobs in schools? Well, if you look at some of the initiatives being either proposed or fought against, depending on what we're talking about, in regards to critical race theory, right? How much transparency should be provided to parents as to what's going on in their children's schools? A lot of school districts, a lot of teachers are fighting back against the idea that parents should be allowed to have a full look and observation of what's going on in the schools, as though what's going on in the schools are not the parents' purview, that they have no right to know in some way. More and more and more school districts, teachers, and so on, administrators, are pushing to treat children as wards of the state more than they are the children of their own parents. And that's why. That's how they have jobs, because they're going along with the program. Now, this isn't the case in every district and every school. You have to, your mileage may vary. But the only reason things like this can exist is because the parents, and apparently the law, doesn't have a whole lot of insight into what's going on. Attila, Scribble, is there a difference between big cities and rural communities, aka population density? Sure. I mean, I think that's just a matter of fact. And how that affects, the effectiveness of a affinity group in a area where there's not a whole lot of diversity because of population density. I don't know how that works, right? Like if you have four, quote unquote, and I hate the phrase, but I'll say it because it's the only way, you have 4 kids of color in a school of predominantly white kids, I'm sure starting up an affinity group will make them feel oh so connected and not make the other kids feel like they're getting special treatment for something that has nothing to do with who they are. But anyway. Let's see. Mike R., my will to live gets chipped away a little bit every time I tune into these things, Scribelight. Not my purpose. I'm sorry that that's the case. Not my purpose. My purpose is to, on the one hand, inform myself, and on the other hand, perhaps inform someone else who has no idea what's going on with these things and hasn't seen it. And again, I wish I was making this stuff up, right? I wish I was, the part of me that wants this kind of thing to have been thrown in the dustbin of history starting, 60 years ago. I wish I was making it up, but time and time again, it's not a trend that's fading, unfortunately. And it seems as though everybody promoting these things does not understand the giant leaps backwards that they are promoting and putting these kids through. Angela Arriaga, the public schools skirt it by saying they're open to all students. Yes, that is the one loophole, is that they don't say you are required to. Although that teacher talking about the Jewish group sure seemed to indicate that you could only attend if you shared their identity. I don't know if it's much of an indication so much as it was a statement, but One of my first adventures in YouTube investigative journalism was something called the Boom Experience at I think it was an elementary school or school district in Washington State. And the Boom Experience, on their advertising splash page, it said in no uncertain terms that this event was for Black, Latinx, and Indigenous male students. Full stop. That's what it was. You can go take a look on my channel under playlists, look for the Down the Rabbit Hole playlist, and that's how that whole thing started. And that was a blatant violation of federal law. And then, as soon as I started emailing news outlets and the school and asking about, doesn't this violate the law? All of a sudden, one day, there was a disclaimer that appeared. I won't give it all away. You can go watch it yourself. But that seems to be the easy loophole. Well, we're going to call it the Black Affinity Group. But, anybody can walk in if they want to. Arc 210, they understand exactly what they're doing, creating the dragon that they want to slay. Now, here's where I disagree slightly, in the sense that I honestly believe that most of the time, not all the time, there are certainly people who are out there for the grift and everything else, but most of the time, a lot of these teachers, educators, and elsewise have convinced themselves that as far as they're concerned, they are honestly doing something positive. They have willfully blinded themselves to the mechanism of discrimination that they say that they are against, and trying to turn it around to say, I'm fixing the problem. This is how you fix the problem. It is a cognitive dissonance that obviously I don't get, but apparently is enough that all of these teachers are smiling about it. Now, some of them may understand the damage that they're doing and don't feel like they don't have a choice, because if they don't, it's their jobs, which honestly makes me dislike such a person even more. It's like, well, I'll keep doing this for the money. But I have to assume that most of them have convinced themselves that they're doing something good. Yeah, fighting fire with fire. And so they don't actually understand what they're doing. If that makes sense. I mean, they understand what they think they're doing, but they seemingly have just decided to block out the actual results of their efforts. Angela Ariag, again, you do good work here. Scribe Light, awareness is required in order to do something to stop the regression. Yeah, I sometimes think I've just fallen into a rut with my content and everything else, but it's because there's a new example every day of this stuff, and it's becoming more and more blatant, more and more mainstream, and I don't understand how it can be, because it seems like such a simple error in judgment. It seems like history should have taught us something about where these philosophies and these ideologies lead inevitably. But somehow, it just keeps going. A couple more, and then I'm going to wrap up. Let's see. Attila, Path to Hell is paved with good intentions. Yep, as always. As always. Let's see. And McZimzim, thanks for the essential public service, Scribe. Well, you're welcome, as much as it is a public service. It is a warning. It is a warning. This stuff is happening all over the place, from Denver to Ohio, from public schools to private schools, and heaven knows how many other places. But I can extrapolate quite a bit from the other videos I've done. Vercingetorix, Scribe Light, I'm going to start sharing your channel a lot more. You've been doing a great job covering the CRT stuff for a long time. Yeah, even when I didn't know I was covering the CRT stuff, even before that, the critical race theory as the buzzword came up to sort of describe so many of the things I've been looking at under that umbrella, or that notion. I think CRT is a very simple and I think in some instances too easily dismissed term, because it's become so overhyped. But if you look at the ideas and the programs and the philosophies being promoted over the several years I've been covering things on Curriculum of Fear and so on, all of it has ties to what is included in current CRT thinking for elementary schools. And do not believe anybody who says that CRT is not being taught in schools, or that there has never been an impulse or an initiative to bring critical race theory into elementary schools. There are academic papers from the 90s and onwards talking about the benefits of it. I've got there's a video out there. I did and some of you know this, I did a live stream series on a 2010 critical race theory panel discussion from Oregon State University, which shows that critical race theory being talked about in educational and academic squares was not some alien notion when it was taking place before the current hype. I'm always hesitant to recommend my own series on it now because I made such a stupid mistake in mispronouncing W.E.B. Du Bois' name. I cringe that I was so off base in that. And so every time that happens in the first episode or whatever, I just want to run away. So more so, I recommend people watch the actual panel discussion absent my commentary. But it's there. If you want to watch it, just know I feel like an idiot to this day. But with that, everyone, I'm going to call it here. Thank you all for joining me for this not exodus. Well, I guess it's an exodus from reason, an exodus from the principles that supposedly were meant to upheld in this country in this day and age. But for joining me either way in this observance of activities taking place in both public and private schools across the country of divvying kids up on the basis of race, gender, religion, sexual orientation. So if you have anything you'd like to add, please leave a comment in the comments below. If you know of a school out there that is doing these things or has initiatives going on that you find questionable in this same way, by all means, let me know. If there's a video they've done on it or a promotional thing, maybe I'll take a look at that in the future on this show. If you'd like to hear more from me, well, a couple of promotional points. First off, both myself and Sinatra Says made an appearance on the Kurt Metzger podcast called Can't Get Right. You can find that over on Kurt Metzger's channel. Just type in Kurt Metzger and you should find it fairly easily. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me here again next Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of TED Excellence, where I'll take a look at another off-brand TED Talk for wisdom and entertainment. I call it Wiztainment. Yes. And otherwise, guys, also, I'll always forget to mention this. If you share my stuff, or if you share the content of any other creator on YouTube or otherwise, especially on Twitter, because that's my primary social media hub, please be sure to tag the creator if they have a Twitter account. I'm looking at you, Dave's Lemonade, in your tweet so that they know that you've done so. Because for myself, I appreciate it, and I would like to thank you personally if you do. So, all that being said, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well-behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated, either to myself or any of the GoFundMes pinned at the top of the chat box, thank you so much for your generosity. It is really appreciated. I hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday. I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everybody. Take care.